Hello, lovers of poetry. In this beautiful natural scene, we are going to enjoy one of the most beautiful English poems. The name of the poem is The Daffodils, written by William Wordsworth some 118 years ago. So, before discussing, first of all, let us recite the poem. The Daffodils by William Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the shore to me had brought. For oft on my couch when I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. That is the poem. I have already told you that this poem was written by William Wordsworth, and William Wordsworth, along with some other poets, started a new trend of writing poems in English that is called Romanticism. And Wordsworth is known for his love of nature, for his very sincere and authentic presentation of nature in his poems. And the Daffodils is an example. There is a background to the poem. In 1802, Wordsworth was on a visit to a place along with his sister Dorothy Wordsworth, and they at that time were fascinated by seeing a beautiful scene of a belt of daffodils. Later on, when the memory of those beautiful things came to his mind, he enjoyed it so much. That is the description in the poem. So I would like to request you one thing, that whenever you learn anything, any poem or any prose piece or any topic in any subject, you learn it for two reasons, for two objectives. First objective is to study it, to know the answers, to get marks in the examination, to pass examinations. This is a very short-term objective, but there must be a long-term objective. What is it? Learn it for your life. The same thing I will apply to this poem also. When you study this poem, at the end you see what is the message that the poet has conveyed to us that we can utilize for our whole life. Quite interestingly, Wordsworth wrote this poem about 118 years ago, and about 300 years before Wordsworth, in the early 17th century, there is another poet, Robert Herrick. This Robert Herrick had written a poem. The name of the poem is To a Daffodil. Wordsworth wrote The Daffodils, and 300 years before Wordsworth, Robert Herrick wrote To a Daffodil. And if you study that poem, then you will find how the two poets on the same thing have looked at from two different perspectives. That is another thing that we should know, that can help us in living our life happily, that it all depends on how you look at a thing. Wordsworth was fascinated by the beauty of the daffodils so much that many years after seeing this thing, the impact of this beauty was there in his mind. What about Herrick's poem, To a Daffodil? That was written 300 years before that. Robert Herrick looked at daffodils, and he looked at the transitoriness of the flower. And he says, the first line is, fair daffodils, we weep to see you. In this way he said that before it is known, you fade away, you die. So your life is very temporary. And then he says, this is how human life is. Our life on earth is transitory. We are not here to live permanently. This is the message that Robert Herrick conveys to us through through his poem. Wordsworth conveys to us the beauty of nature, the permanence, the long-term influence that natural beauty has on human mind. So two persons writing a poem on the same topic, some 300 years, there is a gap of some 300 years in between, messages are different. Let us come back to the poem of Wordsworth, The Daffodils. If you see the text of the poem, in a poem, when a poet writes a poem, he tries to add beauty to language. And adding beauty to something that is already beautiful is a human nature. You often see ladies wearing ornaments. Why? Because they are already beautiful. They want to add some more beauty to it, so ornaments are used. In the same way, when you speak, when you write, when you compose a thing, you can add some extra beauty to it. This is what poets do. And this is called figures of speech. Figures of speech is a device by which poets add beauty to their composition. So, in this poem, you will find a good number of figures of speech. What are those figures of speech? Let me give you some examples. Simile, metaphor, hyperbole, and then personification. These are some of the examples of figures of speech. And in this poem, you will find a good number of figures of speech very appropriately used by the poet. Let us have a look at the poem from the beginning. I wandered lonely as a cloud. See the comparison. I wandered, W-A-N-D-E-R, wander. It means to roam about, to move casually, without any objective. You are not going somewhere with a kind of objective that, yes, I have to go to market to purchase a thing. No, you are just roaming casually. That is called wandering, W-A-N-D-E-R. There is another word, W-O-N-D-E-R. This means to be surprised. But this wander is W-A-N-D-E-R. It means to roam about. The poet said, I wandered lonely as a cloud. See, the poet is comparing himself with a cloud. In the cloud, you see, in the sky, clouds are moving and moving and moving. They are going from here to there. In the same way, the poet said that he was wandering all alone. And he said that it was like a cloud. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. When all at once I saw a crowd, you see the crowd, the word crowd is usually used for human beings. When there is a large number of people, we say it's a crowd. But the poet here does not refer to any human being. Here, crowd means, in the next line he says, a host. A host means a large number of daffodils. The crowd that the poet refers to in the poem is not the crowd of a human being. It is not a human crowd. It is a crowd, a huge number of daffodils the poet saw, a host of golden daffodils beside the lake, beneath the trees. Lake is a water body that is bigger than a pond, and the poet said that beside the lake, beneath is a word that you have to pay attention to. Beneath means under. When poets usually use this word, there are certain words in every language which poets prefer to use. In any prosaic competition, in any kind of prose texts, you will rarely find those words. Poets usually use them. Beneath is one such word. Beneath means under. Beside the lake, beneath the trees. Where were the daffodils? The daffodils that the poet saw, those daffodils were beside a lake. Beside means near. See, in your class 10 also you got these words. Beside and besides. Besides means in addition to. And beside means near. The multitude of daffodils that the poet saw, they were near a lake, near a water body, and under trees. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. They were just because of the impact of air on them, the wind on them, they were moving, they were dancing, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine. The poet firstly compared himself to the cloud, and now he is comparing the daffodils to the stars in the sky. His thought is lofty. He himself is compared to the cloud, and the daffodils are now compared to the stars in the sky. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. If you look at night sky, you can see stars twinkling. The beauty that the daffodils produced, the charm, the nicety that the poet witnessed there, the poet is comparing all this charm and beauty of the daffodils to the beauty of the night sky when stars shine there. The poet said that a star. The poet is comparing the daffodils to the stars in the sky, that the stars, they have a long line, a never-ending line. In the same way, the poet said that he saw daffodils, they were in a long line, and the poet said that they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. This line is very important. 10,000 saw I at a glance. See, some things are to be discussed here. Firstly, the poet said 10,000 saw I at a glance. The poet should have said, I saw 10,000. Instead of saying, I saw 10,000, he is saying 10,000. The object comes first. This is also called poetic license. Poets have the freedom to use the language in a way in which our traditional grammar does not allow. That is called the license that the poets have got. It's called poetic license. So this is called hyperbaton. Hyperbaton is the change of the order of words. For the sake of poetry, the poets usually do it. Here also the poet has done it. Instead of saying, I saw 10,000, he said, 10,000 saw I at a glance. Now the question is, one point is there, it is a use of hyperbaton. The poet is beautifying the language by putting 10,000 at the beginning. He is emphasizing on the hugeness, the multitude of daffodils. But the question again is, how come he said it is 10,000? Did he count it? And is it possible for someone to count all the daffodils and say 10,000? No. That is another figure of speech. That is another way of beautifying language. And in every language, users of every language does it. When those people of you who are Sylheti, you also are very familiar with certain terms. For example, if you are doing something repeatedly and your father is not happy with you and he is saying, instead of saying, he wants to tell, I have told you many, many times not to do it. But instead of saying, I have told you many, many times, he will say, I have told you 100 times. Was it 100 times really? Did he count it? No. That is a use of hyperbole. Another example let me give. For example, there is a man who has a mango tree in front of his home, and this mango tree is on the edge of the boundary. So the passers-by have the freedom to pick mangoes. They throw a stone, a mango falls, they pick it. The owner of the mango tree has little control over the mango tree. So the owner is telling his friend one day, he wants to say that many people, all the passers-by, they take mangoes from my tree. I don't have the privilege of taking it, although I am the owner. Instead of saying this, he is saying, he is saying that all the children of the world take mangoes from it. Is it the fact? No. By this he means to say that many people, many children take it. So hyperbole is the exaggeration of the words. You mean to say one thing, but you use certain words which gives a much more exaggerated meaning. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. Yes, the poet said that daffodils were dancing because of the impact of air on them. The flow of wind made it dance. And beside the daffodils, what was there? You know, in a lake, there are waves. In river or sea or even in a lake, sometimes even in a pond also, there are waves. There is this movement of water. So this wave, that is very beautiful to see. But the poet is saying that the wave produced the beauty in the lake, but that beauty was very minimal, very nominal. It was very ordinary compared to the beauty the daffodils produced by their dance. They outdid the sparkling waves in glee. Outdid. Its base form is outdo. O-U-T-D-O. It is a single word. It is not out and do. Outdo. One word. Outdo means to do better than someone else. For example, you have in HSLC, you got 60% marks and your brother got 70. He did better than you. In higher secondary, what happened? You got 90% and he got 80%. We have outdone him. Outdo means to do perform better than others. The poet is saying that the waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. The happiness that the poet meant to say that the way the daffodils looked, the way they danced, it occurred to him, it seemed to the poet that daffodils were very happy. They produced happiness. And the poet said the happiness produced by the daffodils, the happiness that the daffodils seemed to have enjoyed was much more compared to the beauty and happiness produced by the waves. They out in the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. What about the poet? The poet said that for any poet, those people who write poems, they look for natural beauty. We are not poets, we are exercising poem, we are enjoying a poem. As lovers of poem, we have also come to such a natural place where beauty is there. If this is the case with the lovers of a poem, if this is the poet with those who enjoy a poem, if this is the case with those who study a poem, how much fondness an actual poet will have for natural beauty, you can imagine. So the poet said, a poet could not but be gay in such a jocund company. Gay means happy. A poet could not but be gay. The poet said, the kind of beauty and charm that the daffodils produced, for a poet, nothing is more happy. Nothing can give a poet more happiness. Nothing can make a poet more satisfied but such a scene. And the poet really told the truth. The impact of this beauty on the poet's mind is that, in the last stanzas he said, when I went home on later years, whenever I was lying in my bed in vacant or in pensive mood. Vacant means when your mood is vacant, you don't have any thought inside your mind and you are not having any peace of mind, or you are in a pensive mood, sad mood. The worldly worries, family problems, other things, etc., is making you unhappy. And then during that unhappiness, during that lonely moment, the moment the poet remembers the dance of the daffodils, the moment that beautiful scene comes back to his mind, he becomes so happy that in his mind's eye, he says that the beauty of that, those daffodils, it comes to his mind eye. We have a mind's eye, inward eye. The poet says inward eye. What is this inward eye? These two eyes that I have inside my spectacles, you also have, each of you have two eyes. These two eyes are our physical eyes. And there is something called inward eye, the mental eye that we all have. I don't know the number, whether it is also 2 or 1, but we have something called inward eye. For example, you are now looking at me, you are now looking at the mobile phone and watching this video. But if I ask you to stop the video and then bring to your mind the school room where you attended your class in 10th, last year in your school, in high school where you attended the class, bring back to your mind the scene of the classroom. Yes, the room where the principal or the headmaster sits, that room memory will come to your mind. If I ask you, bring back to your mind a picture of your kitchen. Think about your mother standing in the kitchen and cooking. All these thoughts can immediately come to your mind. All the familiar scenes we can bring back to our mind. That is called inward eye. That the eye with the help of which we can do all these things. That eye is called inward eye. The poet said when, after many years of watching those daffodils, the impact on the mind of the poet is so strong even today that he said that when I lie on my bed, on my couch, on my bed, I have sadness, I don't have any happy moment, there is no reason to make me happy. Then the moment that memory of those golden daffodils that he witnessed beside the lake, under the tree, along with his sister, the moment that memory comes back to his mind, he says that his mind becomes, they fill the memory of the daffodils, they fill the poet's mind with happiness. How much happiness? The poet said so much happiness is there in remembering those scenes that he starts dancing on the bed. On the bed, his body unconsciously starts dancing, just remembering the dancing of the daffodils. So what do we understand from this? From this we know that the impact of a beautiful thing on human mind is very long, it's permanent, and it makes us happy also. So we should, the message that the poet gives is that go, enjoy beauty, see beauty, spend time with beautiful things. The way we are making the video in this beautiful scene now, go and enjoy beauty. Maybe after 5 or 10 or even 20 years, when you will remember that thing in your happy, in your sad mood, in your worried mood, maybe those scenario will produce beauty in your mind. And although the day is very sad, it will make you happy. This is the message, and this is the brief summary of the poem. In the next video, we will use chalk and board, and there we will discuss the vocabulary, some other linguistic aspects, and we will discuss word for word, and then I'll give you some activities. I hope you have enjoyed the poem. If that is the case, then wait for my next video. Thank you very much.